essentially what's happened is the Moscow Stock Exchange, which would be, let's say we're from the UK, it would be our equivalent of the London Stock Exchange. It has certain currencies that you are allowed to buy stocks and shares in Russian companies like Gazprom, Lukoil, Rosneft, any company that's listed there. What's happening now is you're not able to directly buy those using dollars and euros, but you can use other currencies, be that ruble, Chinese renminbi. However, you brought up the point of over-the-counter. What that basically means is that any Russian bank can still swap your dollars and euros for rubles and vice versa. You can hold dollars in your Russian bank account as well as rubles. So the average consumer isn't really affected by it. They're just going to have to convert the funds into a currency that the Moscow Stock Exchange will now accept.
All right, but Chris, it said that, I mean, in the statement, it said that the average or everyday Russian won't be affected. I mean, is that really the case, or?
That's not the case whatsoever. So every single Russian bank that does accept dollars is still doing so. The central bank has not restricted that whatsoever. And indeed, we looked at the sort of the resilience of the banks. You know, when news like this happens around the world, you can see some fluctuation in the price of the country's main currency being the Russian ruble. We didn't really see an effect at all. We saw some of the small banks adjust their price, but every major bank, be that the Sberbank, Russia's largest bank, or any of the bigger banks in Russia, really keep the rate. I was looking at the rates this morning. It's around 89 cents to the ruble on a dollar value term, which is about the same as it's been all the way through. And indeed, we've seen some fluctuation between ruble and dollar since you and I have been actually here in Russia a couple of years. I'm sure you've seen it yourself, but it always seems to recover back to where it should be, which is around the mark we're seeing right now. I don't think it is at all, Murad, because we're seeing a massive global movement toward de-dollarization. I mean, if we take some news from Saudi Arabia, I believe this week, that Saudi, they have a 50-year treaty where they exclusively have to trade their oil reserves in US dollars. Now, we know they're not going to renew that treaty because they've already agreed with the Chinese that they will buy, the Chinese can buy oil from them in Chinese renminbi. So I think really the process that's happening now is by the US putting these sanctions, they're only just accelerating their own demise and accelerating de-dollarization. In fact, I think we've got a clip from President Putin where he actually outlines his opinion on this.
Today's American authorities are breaking their tools of success. The dollar is one of the few instruments of the United States' greatness. With their own hands, they are pushing the withdrawal of participants in global economic activity away from the dollar. This is happening because of a reduction in the size of the American economy, and their actions are accelerating this process.
So as we can see from that, Murad, I mean, President Putin is making that point very clear. There's also another sort of snippet of news that he mentioned as well. The World Bank, which is not really a good friend of Russia's, has changed its GDP forecast again. So it was 1.3% growth for Russia. They're now saying between 2.3 to 2.9%. So really, these sanctions are completely ineffective.